Well, first of all, I want to welcome everybody for joining us today. My name is Michelle Luters, and I work for the Administrative Office of the Courts and Probation here in Lincoln, Nebraska. My role within the probation division is to support Nebraska probation officers statewide related to detention matters. And I also serve as the statewide JDAI coordinator here in Nebraska. As we get started, we want to make a couple of announcements. I have in the chat, but just as a reminder, if you are not a presenter, please shut your cameras off. That will save on some bandwidth and hopefully prevent us from any delays or anything along the line there. If we do see cameras on, we might have people go into the lobby because that will help us with the bandwidth. For those of you that were able to join us last month, this is part 2 in our 3-part series on Nebraska and South Dakota partnership that we've put together. We are bringing to stakeholders in both states some presentations around juvenile justice work that is occurring. Last month, we were able to have young people or formerly involved young people within both Nebraska and South Dakota, a part of our panel discussion. And so today I'm going to allow Amy Broken Leg, my counterpart in South Dakota, to introduce herself and bring us into this session. For those of you that are just joining us, if you could please turn your cameras off, that will help save on bandwidth for our presentation.
Thank you, Michelle. And for those of you, I would just make another announcement too, that you can go up to the layout on the upper right-hand side and click that and say hide participants with video off. And please make sure your video camera is off. On the bottom, say stop video. Well, yes, thank you so much, Michelle. I'm really excited about our webinar today. So today you're going to hear from Terry Liggins and Erik Bringswhite. Today's webinar is really about rethinking what programming for youth looks like. It's about what peer mentorship can look like, trauma-informed care, and most importantly, the impact that folks with lived experiences in the system can provide. So our last webinar, you had an opportunity to hear from youth and more youth voices becoming more present in juvenile justice reform. Systems and policymakers are finding it really helpful to hear from youth when they make their decisions. So what kind of things are we hearing from youth about what helped them when they were system involved? Well, we're hearing, of course, that it's really important to have adults that believe in them and support them even when mistakes are made. It's also important that they're connected to positive things that are of interest to them in their communities. And more, we're starting to hear how important it is to have people that look like them and can relate to them when it comes to their case management and their programming. So as you hear about Terry and Erik's programs today, think about how their experience and what they have to offer youth could really be beneficial in your own communities. So instead of reading their bios, I'm going to let them share their own experience. And Terry, we're going to start with you. So Terry, can we just start with you telling the audience a little bit about yourself and about your program?
Sure can. Can you hear me okay? And then okay, you can hear me now.
Yes.
Okay, so my name is Terry Liggins. I am here in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I'm originally from Omaha, Nebraska. I grew up there. I grew up there in the inner city. I grew up in a single parent home. I know that, part of my experience is my father not being around. When I was 4 years old, that's when my father abandoned our family. And at that time, my mother was still impregnated with her 5th child at that time. I'm belonging to my dad. A couple years later, after my little sister was born, my mother had another child and again, grew up in this single parent home of 6. And what happens when you are in that environment, your parents work a lot. My mom worked 2 jobs for as long as I can remember. And though that was a necessity, for her to be able to provide that security for us, that also showed up in neglect and a lack of availability that I had for guidance from emotional availability that I had from my mother, and then with my father not being around, of course there was that absence and that neglect in that as well. And just like most youth in that situation, you go and look and search for belonging, and you find that in your neighborhood, and you find that, in my case, I found that in getting involved with the neighborhood gang. And so, in Omaha, I was affiliated with the gangs there, and eventually, through choices that comes along with gang activity, you end up in juvenile detention, juvenile probation, house arrest. These are things that I experienced as a youth in in Omaha, in Omaha. But through my juvenile probation, I was ordered to participate in an extracurricular activity. And I started with basketball, my favorite sport. And after the basketball season, I joined the track team. And I discovered during that experience that I had this gift for hurdling. And what ends up happening is, 3 years later, I earned a track and field scholarship to the University of South Dakota to run track there as a hurdler. I should tell you that also when I was a youth, I became a parent. 8 days after my 15th birthday, my son was born. And, I was lived this reality of not only the abandonment of my mom through work and my father through his choice to leave, but now also the weight and responsibility of what it means to be a parent at 15 years old. When I went to college in Vermilion, I looked back over my life and realized I moved 17 times in 18 years. So I had that level of insecurity as well when it came to housing. I know what it's like to not be sure how very merry your Christmas is going to be, what the size of your birthday party is going to be. I know what it's like to have secondhand just about everything. Brand new was a rarity, and it only happened on occasion, and very limited occasion at that. So, growing up in that type of environment, certainly not in the middle class, and certainly not in the upper lower class. I mean, we didn't have much, and there was a time, even I recall, with my mother and the issues she had with substance use at that time. For the first 10 years of my life, we actually moved into a women's and children's shelter in 1995 when I was 10 years old for 90 days for my mother to get clean from her addiction to the drug crack cocaine. And she's now been clean for 25 years. So, homeless as a 10-year-old youth, parent at 15, dad never around, joined the gang, went to detention centers, but went to college on a track and field scholarship. I ended up getting a bachelor's degree in criminal justice and leadership studies. I ultimately went and got a master's degree as well in nonprofit administration. And then 2 years ago, after a little bit of finding my way, incorporated the Hurdle Life Coach as an organization to provide inspiration, education, and motivation to students of all ages, community members in all stages, focusing on youth that have been impacted by detention or incarceration. And also we serve this adults as well who are vulnerable in transition.
Very cool. Thank you, Terry. So as I said before, so when we've heard from youth, we've heard that they really want to be working with people who look like them and that they can relate to. Can you talk a little bit about why you think that this is important and the power of being a peer-led program? Because that's one thing that is really cool about your program from the get-go. What you're trying to do is you're involving folks with that lived experience like yourself and other folks in the community. Yeah, can you talk a little bit about why that's important?
Yeah, so it's important for a couple of different reasons. One of the reasons is it's rare. There's a lot more professional support services that are out there as options for reform or support or care than there are peer-led organizations. And that's a frustration, is that you have this experience that is a qualifier that allows for you to be effective, yet that those experiences often exclude you from certain opportunities. So that's very frustrating when we know that experience is the best teacher. Experience is the best teacher. You learn more from your experiences than you do from the experiences of others. Now, in wisdom, it's best that you learn from the experience of others, right? At Hurdle Life, we remind people that you learn two ways in life: mistakes and mentors. Those are the two different ways you're going to learn in life: mistakes and mentors. You can learn from the mistakes of other people or the experiences of other people who have been where you've been and trying to get to where you're going, or you can learn the hard way. And we all can attest that we've done both, right? We've made our own mistakes, but along the way, we start to really realize the value of having strong mentorship in your life as well. And when you are the type of person who has made your fair share of poor choices, you become best equipped to help other people navigate those same type of challenges. And when you have that lived experience, when you have the peer association, what I'm able to do that is a gift and that is unique from other organizations is I'm able to look youth dead in the eyes and tell them, I get it. I understand. I know exactly what that feels like. And so closely relate, sometimes even identical, right? So one thing I do know is that you don't have to have the same lived experience to still have the shared perspective, right? You don't have to have had your dad leave your family in order to know what abandonment feels like. But if we both share abandonment and that abandonment is identical, like our dad's leaving the family or becoming a teen parent or experiencing juvenile detention, even more so is the strength of peer association and the value from peer association and working with people that look like them, have those same experiences, is there's a different level of trust that comes in that. There's a different level of obviously relatability, but that relatability then brings forth a trust. And there is no influence without trust. There's no influence without trust. You can have all the information in the world, all of the research, all of the theory, all of the data, no trust, no influence. But when you have the lived experience that's similar or sometimes even identical, you're able to get a different type of trust from participants. And with that trust comes transparency. And now they're sharing things that they don't usually share. Now you're discovering things that others are not finding, that is really bothering people on the inside, that's causing them to behave in the way that they're behaving, think in the way that they're thinking. And now you actually get to the point where you're working with the root of the problem, root of the issue, instead of just hanging out at the surface and looking at behaviors and focusing on compliance or consequence and punishment. When you're a peer, you get trust, you get transparency, and you're able to get to the root. And now the information, now the theories, now the approaches, now when you say them as a peer mentor, they have a different type of impact. They root differently than it is when you are just a person with, say, the letters behind your name to do this work. And there's value in that, but when there is there's also value in having lived experience, and it's something that you can't go to school for. It's something you have to survive.
Yeah, I think you got me thinking too when you talk about, there's no influence without trust, and that relationship piece is such a big part of the work with youth.
Mm-hmm.
And even, you talk about like the educational piece. Well, I've got my master's in social work, and we learned in grad school that the therapeutic approach, 30% of any of your approach with clients is relationship.
Mhm.
And, you know, college doesn't teach you that, right? Lived experience teaches you that. And more than anything, relationship is what's needed to really enact any kind of behavior change in youth. And so I think what you're saying, Terry, just is really on point for what we should be considering. So
Absolutely.
that also kind of leads me to my next question, which would be about how do you incorporate trauma-informed care in your programming and in your work, Terry? Because you know, like you said, without that trust, there's no influence. So how do you consider trauma, and how do you incorporate that into your work?
At Herd of Life, we have 5 beliefs that we facilitate all of our interactions through, and that is the interaction through the care and support that we provide to our participants, but also in how we treat each other and in how we engage with our partners. And so our approach to care is a full circle. It's not just to the people we support, it's all the way around. But our 5 beliefs, the number 1 belief is that a trauma-informed community is in the best interest of everyone. We also believe that human potential is infinite. We also believe that self-confidence, self-esteem, and self-worth is the beginning part of the process. We know that if we surround people with the infrastructures of food, housing, and employment, that's great. But if we don't address esteem, value, and confidence, then there's still holes left in the person that they will attempt to fill with behavior, with substance use, or at worst, violence or crime. We also believe in character. Character counts. Talent will carry you where only character will keep you. Everyone gets to the point at where they're at in their position in their lives based on talent. Your talent brought you to the place that you are, but your character keeps you there. And that is something that in my own history of growing, I was full of talent. I lacked the character that I have today. And I've been so fortunate to embrace mentorship in my life over the last 4 or 5 years that has really transformed me and helped me to see the value of true character. So we also educate and coach on things like integrity, punctuality, honesty, gratitude, humility. These different type of things is not just about talent, it's also about character. And we also believe that faith is fuel, and that you can believe that you can receive that in what you don't have yet. And while you're anticipating that with great confidence, to have a gratitude for the moment in the now and see the abundance in the day. So I said our 5 beliefs, but our number 1 belief, Annie, is that a trauma-informed community is in the best interest of everyone. Everything that we do at Herd of Life comes through the understanding of what it is to work with individuals who have had adverse childhood experiences, or they're called ACEs. And for some people on the call, hopefully you've heard of that term before. For others who it may be new to, this is a huge deal, a big deal. It's imperative, it's important, it's critical that we as professionals understand ACEs, understand the Adverse Childhood Experience Study, when it was conducted, what it found, and what are the impacts of adversity in childhood. And so just a quick overview in regards to it happened in the early 90s. Over 17,000 participants. Dr. Robert Ander, Vincent Folletti went out and did this research, and they found that early adversity in childhood had strong correlations to life outcomes, physical health disparities, disease, and even early death. And so what we know from this research is that ACEs has an impact on how people behave and what people ultimately become or do. And so ACEs is another way of saying childhood trauma. And so in everything that we do at Herd of Life, we do it through a trauma-informed understanding and through a trauma-informed lens. So we know that there are 6 tenets to trauma-informed care. Like, we understand that the behaviors that we see are symptoms or adaptations to experiences. They're not just defiance. It's not bad people. It's not bad kids. It's not bad children. Youth aren't truant because they want to not graduate high school and ultimately be an adult that has a hard time finding a job because they don't have a high school diploma. That's not why they're truant. There's something going on at home. There's something going on in life. There are experiences that informs behaviors. And this is the understanding of ACEs. So whether that behavior is truancy, drug use, sexual promiscuity, and detention, experiences is what we know informs behaviors and beliefs. So in all that we do, because we're trauma informed, we interact with compassion. We interact with grace, humility. We actually start with listening. Absolutely start with listening and using motivational interviewing techniques to figure out what has brought this youth to this place where they're at today. We believe in whole life, whole person, and whole family approaches when it comes to hurdle life. This is also being trauma informed. But as we look at not only the understanding of ACEs, stress early in childhood, how that affects the brain, because this is a part of the understanding of ACEs as well, the different parts of the brain, the functions of the brain, the different things that go offline when a person is triggered or activated. So when we understand ACEs, when we understand trauma, we know that when a person is activated, they're in their fight, flight, and freeze. They're in their limbic system. Their prefrontal cortex is offline. Empathy and logic is not yet now present. And in order to be effective in influence, we first have to help self-regulate. We must self-regulate. And so instead of just coming at people with directives and consequences and threats, we seek to understand. We share our lived experience. We use the trauma-informed tenets like trust and transparency, creating safe environments. Peer support is a trauma-informed approach. It's a part of the 6 tenets of trauma-informed care. So in everything that we do, Annie, we take it through the 6 tenets of safety, trust and transparency, collaboration, empowerment, voice and choice, and there's a few others, but everything goes through the trauma-informed lens. So not only does my peer experience matter when working with our youth participants as a trauma-informed approach, also their peer experience. So now as we are utilizing the graduates of our program to pour out as they've been filled up, so it's not just adult peers, it's youth peers. And it's us as professionals moving into this perspective that we see the value in their experiences, but we also recognize how their experiences inform their behavior, and that we don't just focus on punitive and compliance-based approaches, that we actually go beneath the skin, beneath the surface, be trauma-informed, seek to understand, use patience, and the other trauma-informed approaches to ensure that we're moving towards healing, not just correction.
Thank you, Terry. I think that's huge how you ended that, from healing, not just to healing, not just correction. And I think, having, again, your lived experience, you shared a little with us at the beginning of this webinar about your history and some of your own trauma that you've experienced, I think makes it all the more, maybe easier is the right word to say, how you can, be that person that can offer that trauma-informed care and relate to those youth. So thank you. And we have Erik Bringswhite here. Hi, Erik. Erik, would you mind sharing a little bit with us? Erik's on the other side of the state in South Dakota. He's over in Rapid City. And those of you that are coming to the in-person conference in Rapid City will have an opportunity to tour Erik's program, I Am Legacy. So we're excited about that. But Erik, would you mind just kind of sharing a little bit about yourself and I Am Legacy and how I Am Legacy came to be?
Absolutely. Appreciate the opportunity. Actually, I'm in Albuquerque. today. But a little bit about myself is I've experienced the incarceration as a juvenile and as an adult. I am legacy. I've created to give the system impacted people in my community an opportunity to not only navigate through those hurts that are direct result of incarceration, but to also be a part of the solutions for the next 7 generations, and how we solve some of this before we're a whole nation within a nation of felons, whole nation of felons within a nation.
Well, that's incredibly restorative, that approach, right? You know, to heal and to and that's kind of what today is about, right? Like getting community, like giving this work back to the community to say, how can we heal? How can we move forward? And when we look at our data, and this is a big theme of the conference, is, you know, our disparities among youth of color in South Dakota. And I don't want to make assumptions, but I'm sure Nebraska has some disparities as well among their youth of color. And, you know, so if those are the most impacted youth, how are we, you know, making programming that fits those youth, right? And Erik, I mean, when I first walked into your program, I Am Legacy, it was like, wow, this is it, right? This is incorporating culture. This is, you know, it's full of everyone, you know, at your organization is in a position where those kids can relate to them. Can you talk a little bit about what like the structure of I mean structure, but how you incorporate culture into I Am Legacy, and how important is culture in your programming?
Well, culture is our root at I Am Legacy. I guess what we're experiencing today in our community is we don't lean on our culture or tap into the eons and eons, the eons of solutions and strength and resiliency that our culture affords us in navigating and addressing some of these issues in contemporary society. And so we're seeing one of the biggest, I guess, barriers or obstacles is a lot of our youth don't know how to be indigenous. And on one side, the other is they don't know how to be Euro-Western either. So they're navigating in between those two dichotomy, or those two silos, and they're not doing very well because they're not rooted or grounded in either or. And so at Legacy, we work to restore identity, recover our sacred purpose. But that is our culture, that we're born with a purpose in life. And because we don't have rites of passage, a whole slew of the cultural resources in an urban setting, we're seeing that reflected in the incarceration numbers, the out-of-home placement, just a few of the. But we want to tap into these eons of eons and eons of and cultural strength resiliency. I think in our culture, there's always been solutions to a lot of the issues that we're facing. We're not tapping into them. So at Legacy, that's what we give the opportunity to do.
Yeah, right. I mean, you offer those experiences, and I had asked Terry this question, and I don't know if it's possible, Erik. I've gotten a couple messages that it's a little hard to hear you. I feel like I can hear you fine, but I don't know if that's so I don't know if you could maybe try to talk a little louder, but I do have another question for you. So I asked Terry this question, and at the beginning of the webinar, our last webinar in this series, we talked about we heard from youth, and what we're hearing from youth that have been involved in the system is that it's really important for them to work with people that look like them and work with people that they can relate to. So knowing that, can you talk a little bit about like your thoughts on that, and why do you feel that that's important? Or can you tell us maybe what your thoughts would be on that, Erik?
Absolutely. I'm going to try to talk louder. I had trouble hearing Terry as well. I didn't hear most of what he said, but I think it's important for our youth to see themselves when they walk into a place that is founded or created or facilitated or even funded to bring about their betterment and their uplifting. At Legacy, we are who we serve. We are our community, and I think that's it does a lot in a young person's psyche, or the way they perceive the situations that they're navigating through. It just feels a little bit more safer. I've experienced walking into a courtroom and they wouldn't let my grandma in as a juvenile. I'm raised by my grandma. Like a lot of indigenous youth were raised by our grandparents, and so I fell outside the line of the law there, and so I went to court. They wouldn't let my grandma in, and when I got into court, it was no natives there. It was a room full of non-natives, and it was really a formidable experience, one that I carry with me today, and it shaped and informed and molded the way I was able to see this justice system. And so, and with taking into consideration of the healing and being about the healing, you have to take into account that this is the first time a lot of our vulnerable populations are actually entering into society. And we call it reentry, we call it all these things. It's the first time for a lot of people, even, I know that's probably hard to understand, especially if you haven't ever been to a reservation or into a tribal community. This is the first time we're entering into society. So if we could, kind of look at that as what the needs are, and, give them a true wraparound services at that point, even though, technically we are all a part of society. Reservation life is, tribal life is just a little different, just a little different. I'm not trying to say they need more specialized care or more, different care than anyone else does, but just a different way of looking at the care that's being offered, the services that are being provided.
Eric, you said something that I've heard my husband and some other folks say. Um, you talked about reservation life being different, than living in Sioux Falls or Rapid City or Aberdeen or other places across South Dakota. And it is, and it's always surprising to me to hear about how many people that live in South Dakota that have never been to a reservation, or don't know simple Lakota greetings or Dakota greetings when it's the language that's native to this land. And I just say that if we are working with, and we can look at our data and say that we have a large population of Native American youth that come into our system. So if you're on this webinar, you're probably at least in South Dakota, and I know Nebraska, you have a Native population as well, but in South Dakota, you're definitely working with Native youth, and so having some awareness of what it would be like to live on a reservation, or what that looks like, I think is just really, really important. So yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out, Eric. Terry, I want to go back to you. And can you talk about, just shifting gears here a little bit, what do you think that system stakeholders and court professionals should be aware of or think about when it comes to community-based programming, like what you're trying to do with the Hurdle Life Coach? Does that make sense?
It does. And I didn't mention yet the name of our program, which is called Change. And it stands for Challenging Historically Accepted Notions for Greater Expectations. It's a spirit that we coach into our participants, that despite the environments that they're born into, that they could shape a belief that they can be bigger than that box, bigger than those conditions, bigger than those realities. It's important that we do give that sense of hope of what's beyond societal expectations, because if you just settle for that, you'll get exactly that. And it's not that you won't experience some of those stereotypes, but you don't have to settle for them. Today I'm proud to be an actively and engaged father as a Black male. But society would say that, Black men aren't holding their water, if you will, in that space. But for me to challenge that, I am the embodiment of what is possible. And so we give that same belief and mindset into all of our participants that we support in the Change program, youth 11 to 17. And again, I did mention that we do adult programming also. What I think is important for system stakeholders, influencers to be mindful of, and the interesting thing about me, even as a leader of this community-based organization, I identify as a part of the system as well. Getting my bachelor's in criminal justice, I started with the intention of becoming a juvenile probation officer. And we know in our studies that the system as we understand it traditionally is law enforcement, corrections, and courts. But at Hurdle Life, one of the things that we are intentional about raising awareness to is the role that community plays in the administration of justice. That there are 4 C's to the administration of justice. That yes, cops have a role to play in the administration of justice. Courts has a role to play in the administration of justice. Corrections has a role to play in the administration of justice, but so does the community. And when justice professionals can begin to embrace that 4th C, Annie, what's going to happen is you're going to you're going to lighten your own load, right? Like, let the community also contribute to the administration of justice. When I do work within the traditional justice system and I talk with a public defender or state's prosecutor or a correctional officer or even the warden at the prison, everyone feels like they've got more issues than they have time, right? They feel like they are overloaded, underpaid, outnumbered in actually administrating justice. The question is, how involved is the community in the administration of justice? What evidence can you point to that community is threaded in your approach to the administration of justice? And by partnering with community-based organizations, peer-led organizations, that is exactly a part of incorporating community. In that concept of community-based justice, it also includes the role of employers, the role of educators and education system. It also includes the role of the neighbor. But absolutely, it also includes the role of organizations like mine and Erik's that are specifically designed to work with individuals that are impacted by detention and incarceration. The question is, how much presence are those type of organizations having within the administration of justice? And with that investment, we can then duplicate this type of support. Erik and I are two people, but there are more Erik and Terrys in the world. But if Erik's and Terry's can get investments that would allow for us to broaden our program, reach more people, coach more mentors, we could then have more people a part of the system helping with the work. So what's in it for system players? Lightening your load is one of the things that's in it for you. The second thing is, as you engage people with meaningful growth and learning and development opportunities, you keep them busy. You help them find purpose and meaning. And now all of a sudden, these become individuals that are contributing to society and world in a positive way and not tearing it down through violent outbursts of rage and bitterness and frustration. When you allow community-based organizations that focus on healing to help people to heal, what you get is less anger. When you have less anger, you get less violence. When you get less violence, you get less crime. You get less crime, you get more safety. And that is the goal of every single justice professional, is a safe community. So by partnering with community-based organizations, not only do you lighten your load, you actually start to contribute to solutions that help people find meaning, purpose, and contribution, leading to healing, leading to less anger, frustration, bitterness, crime, and ultimately safer communities.
Well said. So I wanted to, first of all, I'll say that we probably will have some time if people do have questions for Terry and Erik. If you want to throw them in the chat, we can try to get to them. But I want to touch on what you said, that because I want to share, just my own experience. And Erik's actually in Albuquerque, so it ties in with my first trip to Albuquerque. And we visited Albino Garcia's program, La Placita, in Albuquerque. And Erik, I don't know if you're seeing Albino while you're in Albuquerque, but tell him hi from me. And I think all of us on that trip were just amazed at what was happening. And it was the definition of what you just said, Terry, that the community was absolutely interwoven into their justice reform efforts. And it didn't come without challenges, and it didn't come out, there's definitely challenges in that. But you could see the impact it was having on youth in the South. I think it's the South Valley of Albuquerque, which is predominantly like lots of gang involvement and things like that. So I say that to say that we're sitting at La Placita in Albuquerque and thinking, oh my gosh, how could we get something like this in South Dakota? We need our own albino. And Albino said to us, you don't need another me. You have someone like me in your communities. You're just not looking hard enough. And it was like 2 weeks after that, I went out to Rapid City and I met Erik and went to his program, I Am Legacy. And it was like, see, it exists right here. And Rapid City had already been doing quite a bit of work with Erik, but they have really, to my knowledge, seemed to really have him at the seat and are interweaving him into justice reform efforts, which is phenomenal. So I say that to say that if you're listening to this and saying, I wish that I could do something like this in my own community, you probably have a Terry or an Erik in your communities. Terry, maybe you could talk a little bit about what that looks like, right? Like how and maybe you touched on this a bit, but how you kind of got involved um, with justice reform.
Yeah. And also, I would like to say to you, Annie, that was well said too. Way to bring that around to give hope to Nebraska and other communities that there are people in your community with the heart of wanting to pay it forward. It is our system protocols and red tape that we are limiting what is possible by excluding people based on experiences instead of including people based on experiences. We see that in employment, and we certainly still see that challenges when it comes to justice reform and getting back inside the walls of a jail or back inside the walls of a prison. How much grace and time period is how steep is that mountain to really get back in there to do that type of work. But we have to move towards seeing experience as the reason you're included, not why you're excluded. See experience as a asset and a value, not as a threat. We all come from are human and make choices that we would do over if we could. That's simply what a crime is. It's a poor choice. It's not a bad person. Doesn't mean that they can't be utilized and leveraged to contribute to still doing good in the world because they made a poor choice under certain types of conditions and such. So I love that you invited Nebraska to be hopeful as well in identifying other credible messengers. When it comes to justice reform and how I got involved, like you said, I kind of spoke to it a bit in regards to I went to school for criminal justice, and really being a youth that was on juvenile detention, probation, and house arrest. That experience was by and large a positive experience for me. Not having a dad in my life and being connected to Terrence Mackey. I'll just put his name on. This is Nebraska, right? I'm from Nebraska. I was in the Douglas County Youth Center. And so Terrence Mackey is still a pillar in that community and still a person I trust and have a sincere bond with. And he is proud of the man I've become today. But, being connected to Terrence Mackey and my probation officer back when I was 15 and 16 years old, that sparked it. That sparked my desire and interest to want to contribute to justice and to helping people. Also, my time as a Nebraska workforce development youth who was placed at a Boys and Girls Club. And Dave Felici at the North Omaha Boys and Girls Club became an example of what I could accomplish in my life. And so when I went to college, I studied criminal justice with the intent of doing exactly this. I didn't get here as fast as I thought I would. I didn't right after college, find my dream job. I went to grad school after undergrad, and then after that, Erik mentioned he had experience with incarceration as an adult, as did I. And so I was still learning how to become the person I am today, even after getting my graduate degree. But for me, Annie, has always been in me to want to contribute to community. My three drivers is faith, family, and community. My mother is a neighborhood mom, big on hospitality. Door stays open. We share everything that we have, even doesn't matter the amount that we have. It's just that we share it equally. So I was actually very fortunate to just be connected to the right house arrest officer in Terrence Mackey, some of the other community-based programs like the Boys and Girls Club, going to college and to getting some education, and then my mother's example. But really, it is a testament of that. Though one may be born into adverse experiences, single-parent homes, reservations, etc., that doesn't mean that this person is destined to be a burden to our society. Those experiences informs perspective helps to build resilience and ultimately can really shape out to be what you see today in my leadership at the Hurdle Life Coach.
Great. Thank you, Terry. I'm going to end with a final question for you. And I think, so if there was one miraculous change you could make overnight in the justice system, specific to juvenile justice, but it can be overreaching the system, what would it be?
Am I back up or are we back to Erik?
We're going with you. I think we lost Erik.
Okay. I'll hold it down. That's my brother. If I could change one thing in the system overnight, I almost think about like if I had only one wish to wish for three more because this is difficult. I should have prepared for this. You gave me the questions and everything, and I think I had something in mind, but now I'm just thinking of the number of things I would want to change. And so it's kind of difficult to really say what one thing it would be. But in my heart, I would love to see the perception of the formerly incarcerated just shifted and changed. You know, it's the theme of this conversation. It's what we're talking about at the conference in some ways. There's so many things that I would love to see change, like the environment of detention centers or prisons. Like I would love to see them soften up. I would love to see more mental health support within detention and incarceration, more education programs and such. There's so many things, fair sentencing, more community-based partners. But if we as a system can just shift our perception on people with detention and incarceration experience to really be the most valuable contributors to our efforts to reduce crime, that would be phenomenal. If it wasn't just one or two options of credible messengers, that we as a system had created such a safe environment and that we had spoken so much value and over that experience that we were attracting troves of people who have successfully re-entered community and society, living healthy lives, sober and responsible, and were deeply involved in our justice system as well. So we would have more than just one or two peer-led organizations involved. We would have 15 and 20 to choose from, with people with experiences finally feeling valued and validated for those experiences instead of as if it's some type of anomaly, the experience that they have, and that if it's like as if it's some type of disease. Because again, in many cases, experience excludes you from opportunity. How wonderful would it be if experience is what qualified people in for justice reform?
Thank you, Terry. That's the dream, right? So there is one question. I think we've got time for it, and then we'll just close. So if you get maybe like a 1 minute answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
The question is, why do you think your experience as an incarcerated youth, how did you view that as an overall positive experience as opposed to a negative? Like, what was special about it that made it a positive experience? And maybe it wasn't all positive. I don't know, but
yeah. I think that comes with hindsight as well. You know, when you're going through it, it doesn't feel positive. You know, you don't have as much gratitude as you have for it in hindsight. So I think a lot of that is hindsight, realizing that although it was difficult and uncomfortable, that those things helped to develop, you know, an attention to punctuality, getting involved in extracurricular activities, that they guided me to places and to do things that ultimately worked out for my good. And so it's not really the conditions that were positive, it was the outcomes of the conditions that were positive in hindsight.
Thank you, Terry, because that's what we're hearing from youth. I said it at the beginning, like what they need is adults that are willing to take the time to connect them to something positive, just like your experience, right? Things in the community that will keep them busy, that are positive, and that don't give up on them even though they make mistakes. So thank you so much, Terry. You're getting and Erik, thank you so much. Everyone's very thankful if you read the comments. I'm going to give it back to Michelle. We're going to close it down.
Yeah, thank you all too. I'm seeing that as well. People validating the impact of ACEs. Someone says, "Can we get me back to Nebraska?" I say ASAP. But I am so thankful to be a part of this and to have my experience lifted up. So thank you, Annie, for seeing me here in Sioux Falls and including me in on this. And I look forward to continuing the conversations.
Yep. Thank you so much, Terry and Erik. So we appreciate everyone that has joined us today. As Annie mentioned, this is leading up to our in-person conference that will be hosted in Rapid City, South Dakota, and both Terry and Erik will be a part of that conference. We are sending a select few people from Nebraska to that conference, so we're excited to come up and visit and learn more from what South Dakota has going on. For those of you on the call, we will have one last session next month, so March 25th. It's a Thursday, again over the lunch hour. That webinar will be focused on some of the rural alternative to detention work that's being done in both Nebraska and South Dakota. So Annie and I will be the facilitators for that discussion next month. And then we look forward to seeing everyone next month. And those of you in South Dakota, we will see you then. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your week.